Today, notorious Manchester criminal Paul Doyle has been sentenced to 16 years in prison for his role in a major drug trafficking operation, conspiring to import £300 million worth of Class A drugs into the city. His arrest, which came just before the murder of his former associate Paul Massey in July 2015, marks a significant turn in Manchester's criminal landscape. Known for his violent past and deep ties to the underworld, Doyle's downfall reflects the ongoing battle against organized crime in the region.
How does a seemingly unremarkable man become one of Manchester's most feared gangsters? And what does it take to earn the nickname One Punch in a world filled with violence and crime? At just 5 feet 8 inches tall, Paul Doyle didn't fit the stereotype of a gangster. Many underestimated him, thinking his small stature meant he wasn't a threat. But that perception changed one fateful night in the early 1970s at Manchester's infamous Pips nightclub. As chaos erupted, Doyle found himself at the heart of the action, where he often thrived. In a matter of moments, he laid out 5 men, each with a single powerful punch from his tattooed fist. Etched across his knuckles were the letters ACAB, an acronym that stood for All Coppers Are Bastards, a testament to his disdain for authority and his readiness to confront anyone who challenged him. This was the night One Punch Doyle was truly born, forever altering the landscape of Manchester's gangland scene. Among the onlookers that night was another rising figure in Manchester's criminal underworld, Paul Massey, an old friend that would soon turn rival in a bloody drug war. This is the story of Paul Doyle, a man who built a life of infamy in Manchester's underworld. Known as a gangster, drug dealer, armed robber, and football hooligan, Doyle's criminal career spanned 5 decades, marked by violence and chaos. From the streets to the stands, his life was a relentless cycle of crime and punishment, and much of it was served behind bars at Her Majesty's pleasure. Paul Doyle was born in the late 1950s, one of 7 children in a mixed heritage family with a Jewish mother and an Irish father. By the time his mother was just 25, she was already raising 7 children, 6 boys and 1 girl. When his parents separated, his life took a dramatic turn. He, along with 2 of his siblings, went to live with their father, while the other 4 children stayed with their mother. Living with his father was tough. There were no social benefits to fall back on in those days, and his father worked long hours, even taking on side jobs as a bodyguard to make ends meet. With their father often absent, Doyle's 7-year-old sister stepped up, taking on the role of a parent, bathing him, and keeping the household running. From a young age, him and his older brother Michael, just 8 and 7 years old respectively, began to fend for themselves in the rough streets of Salford. What started as stealing toffees and cakes from local shops for survival quickly escalated into more serious burglaries, leading to frequent run-ins with the police. Each encounter often ended in beatings, not just from the officers, but from their father as well. Unable to control his behavior, Doyle was placed in care at the age of 9. The environment was harsh and militaristic, exposing him to a new world of brutality where he learned to defend himself. By 12, he was arrested for stealing a car and caught with £300 in his pocket, equivalent to about $3 grand today. When questioned about the money, young Doyle lied, hoping it would be returned to his father. Instead, he faced a severe beating by the police, which landed him in the hospital. That beating was a turning point for Doyle. It taught him 2 things. He could endure a punch, and he no longer needed to fear anyone. From that day forward, Doyle's resilience and fearlessness became his defining traits, setting him on a path that would lead deep into the heart of Manchester's criminal underworld. At just 14 years old, after escaping from a reform school, Paul and a group of friends decided to rob a warehouse in Salford. While his friends were busy causing havoc, smashing things up inside the building, Paul had his eyes on a bigger prize. He broke into the office and managed to find the key to the safe, walking away with a hefty sum of $3.5 grand. The police quickly arrived on the scene with police dogs, and a chase ensued. Paul, in a desperate attempt to escape, kicked one of the dogs. This only escalated the situation, and when the officers caught up to him, they beat the shit out of him. He ended up back in the hospital, but before being sent back to reform school, he managed to hand over the stolen cash to his father. Back at the reform school, Paul's violent tendencies continued to grow. He fought with other boys frequently, sometimes using metal bars, sometimes just his fists. These brawls were brutal and unrelenting, even leading to a confrontation with a female inmate who had been convicted of murder. This incident led to his transfer to Kirk Levington Detention Center, where the strict regimen included training 3 times a day. Here, Paul engaged in rigorous physical activities like burpees and push-ups, gradually building a muscular physique that would later contribute to his fearsome reputation on the streets of Manchester. It's all about your genetics, Irish genetics. We come from the Vikings, when Mary, Queen of Scots, brought over 20,000 Spaniards to fight the English. It's all fighting material. It's in our genetics in Ireland. That's where part of my own genetics comes from. So, when the system brings you up to be a gladiator fighting every day, you're conditioned and always ready for battle. So when you come out of those reform schools, all they're really doing is cutting the chain off someone who's been trained for combat. Released from the system on his 18th birthday, Paul Doyle emerged into the world with significant challenges. He was dyslexic, unable to read or write, and had no clear job prospects. With little direction, he found himself frequenting local pubs, where his nights often ended in fights. Despite his small stature, weighing only 11.5 stone, Paul was all muscle and quickly gained a reputation for his ability to knock people out with a single punch. As his notoriety for street fighting grew, Paul caught the attention of a local criminal firm led by Paul Massey, a man who had been through the same harsh reform system as him. This gang, known for its aggressive tactics and fierce reputation, included other notorious figures like the Noonan and MacDonald brothers, well-known tough guys in Salford. He soon joined the ranks of the Salford lads, taking part in their criminal activities. One of their methods involved targeting individuals about to deposit money into night safes outside banks. Paul's role was to act as the heavy, using his imposing presence and fighting skills to deter or physically stop anyone who tried to intervene or resist during the robberies. This marked the beginning of Doyle's deeper involvement in the world of organized crime, as he became an enforcer and a key player in the firm's illegal operations. At this time, Manchester was run by a firm called the Quality Street Gang. The Quality Street Gang, also known as QSG, was a notorious criminal organization based in Manchester, England, during the 1960s and 70s. The gang got their name from a 1960s TV ad for the Quality Street Confectionery, which featured a group of smartly dressed, eclectic characters. The name stuck after someone reportedly shouted, "Hey, it's the Quality Street Gang," when the group walked into a pub, and the QSG was born. Known for their involvement in various illegal activities, the gang was heavily involved in organized crime, including armed robbery, extortion, drug trafficking, and protection rackets. On July 29, 1981, the day of Prince Charles's wedding, tensions boiled over between members of the Quality Street Gang and the Salford lads led by Paul Massey. The conflict started when 6 members of the QSG approached Massey and his associates, including Paul Doyle. They were unhappy with Massey's crew for causing trouble on their turf. The situation escalated quickly when a member of Massey's crew brazenly told one of the QSG to fuck off. In retaliation, one of the QSG members attacked him, smashing a pint glass over his head. This sparked a full-scale brawl, with chaos erupting in the streets. As the fight intensified, Massey and the Salford lads chased the QSG members down, delivering a brutal beating and even throwing one of them into the path of a moving bus. When the police arrived at the scene, the violence did not subside. Instead, the Salford lads turned their aggression toward the officers, leading to further clashes. This resulted in serious charges being brought against Massey and his associates, including a Section 18 charge for grievous bodily harm and attempted murder. During the trial, the wife of the QSG member who had been thrown at the bus took the stand, delivering emotional testimony about the injuries her husband had suffered, stating, "I have to dress my husband every day because of these bastards." Based on her testimony and the evidence presented, Massey and his crew were found guilty and sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, the story didn't end there. Videos later surfaced showing the supposed wheelchair-bound victim, who was a martial arts expert, performing kicks and other movements outside of his wheelchair, casting doubt on the severity of his injuries. As a result, Massey appealed his conviction, and the courts eventually overturned the verdict, leading to their release. The beef between the Salford lads and the Quality Street Gang was far from finished. The QSG wanted revenge, and Paul Doyle was the one they were after. What followed was a tense period marked by escalating violence and near-fatal encounters. Doyle's life was under constant threat from the QSG. On one occasion, he narrowly escaped a deadly ambush when he was shot at with a shotgun. This wasn't an isolated incident. There were numerous attempts on his life, especially at nightclubs where tensions frequently flared up. Each encounter pushed the conflict closer to a breaking point, with both sides suffering casualties and looking for a way to either escalate or end the feud. Recognizing the unsustainable nature of this ongoing war, a crucial meeting was arranged between Paul Doyle and one of the top figures in the QSG, Jimmy Swords. This sit-down was more than just a negotiation. It was a potential lifeline for Doyle. During the discussion, an agreement was reached. The QSG would call off their pursuit and stop the attacks, but on the condition that he stayed away from certain nightclubs under their control. As their reputation and criminal activities grew, Paul Massey and Paul Doyle began to expand their operations beyond the UK. Throughout the mid-1980s, they ventured into Europe, targeting jewelers and bars across countries like Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. Their criminal enterprises became increasingly sophisticated, moving from robberies to more elaborate schemes. In 1986, their activities reached a new level when they were caught in a large-scale operation involving the forging of checks and the importation of counterfeit banknotes. The gang was involved in smuggling over £100,000 worth of forged banknotes into the UK from Amsterdam, which would be worth around $300,000 today. This bold move ultimately led to their downfall. Authorities across Europe were closing in on their network, and in a coordinated operation, Paul Massey, along with Paul Doyle and other associates, was arrested and charged with multiple offenses. The court found them guilty, and Doyle was sentenced to 8 years in prison, but it was reduced to 4 years, marking another chapter in his tumultuous criminal career. Despite their conviction, this period only added to the notoriety of the Salford lads, cementing their status as formidable figures in both the UK and European criminal underworlds. As well as a career crim, Doyle was also heavily involved in football hooliganism, and was a member of Manchester United's notorious hooligan firm, the Red Army. The Red Army was known for its extreme violent behavior, particularly during the 1970s and 1980s, when football hooliganism was at its peak in England. This group was infamous for their aggressive clashes, both at home games at Old Trafford and away matches, where they would often brawl with rival supporters. The Red Army, like other football firms of the time, operated with a strong sense of camaraderie and territorial pride. They were organized and often planned their confrontations with rival fans, creating a tense and dangerous atmosphere around football matches. One of their main rivals was the firms associated with Liverpool Football Club. The rivalry between Manchester United and Liverpool was not only a football rivalry, but also a reflection of the broader social and economic competition between the two cities. Scousers were not welcomed in Manchester, especially on match days, due to the intense rivalry between the two sets of fans. This animosity was so strong that the authorities took steps to keep Mancunians and Scousers separated in prisons to avoid violent clashes, highlighting the extent of the divide between the two groups. In 1993, as gangs fought to control Manchester's drug market and extort club owners for protection money, tensions began to rise between Paul Doyle and Paul Massey. According to Doyle, their dispute began when Massey's new firm, the Ordsall Gang, had encroached on rival Salford territory, while other accounts suggest it was sparked by the shooting of Doyle's brother at a nightclub. Despite their differences, Doyle claimed he and Massey maintained mutual respect, but the animosity between their crews created further conflict in the city's underworld. "I would never throw punches at Massey, not out of fear, but out of friendship. But his firm despised me," Doyle said about the feud. As tensions grew between Paul Doyle and Paul Massey, local pub and club owners in Salford and Manchester, fed up with the trouble Massey's gang was causing, turned to Doyle for help. Doyle saw an opportunity and began barring Massey's crew from most nightclubs in Salford, effectively becoming the gatekeeper against them. This led to a series of confrontations, including a notable clash at the Inn of Good Hope in Eccles, where Doyle and his colleague Graham Boardman faced off against a group of skinheads called the Ugly Firm, a gang allied with Massey. Boardman was known for being polite, but was also an extremely dangerous 16.5-stone lunatic who you didn't want to get on the wrong side of. Doyle shared an incident where a group of men were denied entry to the Inn of Good Hope due to their intoxication. After threatening Boardman, he knocked out 7 of them, leaving just a girl who was with them. Charged with 7 counts of serious assault, Doyle and Boardman faced an ID parade. Knowing the girl from the group might identify them, they strategically placed her next-door neighbor in the ID lineup, intimidating her into silence. The girl suddenly developed a case of amnesia, and no charges were pursued. Doyle also recalled another violent encounter at the Inn of Good Hope. One of Massey's guys questioned what I was doing there, and I just went for him. As his friends came rushing in, Graham Boardman went through a group of them like a knife through butter. The next day, Massey confronted Doyle about the beatings and barring his crew from the pub, calling Doyle a friend, but also challenging him. The tension between the two escalated further. In August 1993, Paul Doyle and Graham Boardman took over security at Kiss nightclub in Bolton, upsetting rivals who saw the club as their territory. Tensions escalated when a black Vauxhall Astra drove by the Inn of Good Hope, firing 11 bullets and injuring 2 bouncers. The next day, a gunman shot at the Devonshire Arms, which was also run by Doyle, injuring a customer. Despite these violent attacks, Doyle and Boardman stayed silent. Shortly after, police arrested 8 men linked to the shootings and another incident at a Manchester nightclub. Massey was sent to court as the ringleader of the shootings, but was acquitted as key witnesses had either failed to turn up to court or were too scared to give evidence. This conflict was known as the Manchester Door Wars that marked a turbulent period in the city's history, with gangs jostling to control the drug supply in Manchester's booming club scene, and venues targeted for protection money.
When I had that trouble with Massey's firm was the most feared in the Northwest, yeah? They had kids in that firm that being shot above the waist just started to come out, yeah? The Noonans got charged, obviously they was not guilty, they got found not guilty for killing somebody, right? They got charged with that, acquitted, rightly so. Now, but after that murder, nobody knows who done it, after that murder, people started to forget about getting legged off. People started to get shot above the waist, yeah? So everyone accepts that. Everybody now, because even the drug scene started to come out, people started to sell weed here, there and everywhere, right? Now this firm, Massey's firm, was that ruthless. They even went to a guy that wouldn't sell weed to beat him up. The guy wasn't at home, there was a wallpaper man putting wallpaper up. They killed the wallpaper man. That's how barbaric this firm is.
In the 90s, Eastern European drug lords faced challenges in cities like Manchester and Liverpool, where local gangs taxed any incoming drugs. To navigate this, they sought out local gangs with strong reputations to handle distribution. Paul Doyle and Graham Boardman, known for their fearsome reputation, were approached by a major drug cartel and flown to Amsterdam. Initially, Doyle only intended to secure 20 kilos of weed, but they were offered control of a warehouse holding 2 tons of cannabis. This was a major step up, and Doyle saw it as an opportunity to enter the big leagues of the drug trade. During their first night in Amsterdam, they met a mysterious man, described as 6'4" and suave. Whilst drinks were flowing and they talked business, the man grimly warned them about the dangers of crossing the organization. He pulled out a Polaroid, which was the stuff of nightmares. It was of a severed head, which was gruesomely displayed on a platter with an apple in its mouth. The head had been mutilated. Its eyes were removed, ears cut off, nose missing, and it had no lips. It was meant to convey a clear and brutal message. Doyle was taken aback by the sickening image as the man looked at him, uttering 7 words. "There are a million ways to die." Despite the ominous warning, Doyle recognized the lucrative potential and the chance to elevate his position within the drug world, choosing to proceed with the operation. They flooded Manchester throughout the 90s and early 2000s with weed and Class A drugs, amassing incredible wealth while running numerous nightclubs, including VIP sections where they drank with footballers like David Beckham, Ryan Giggs, Gary Neville, and Peter Schmeichel. In a chilling twist, Graham Boardman would go on to be brutally murdered in what is believed to be a drug-related execution. He was allegedly lured to Spain with the promise of a lucrative business deal, only to be ambushed and killed by drug barons. Reports suggest his murder was particularly gruesome, with Boardman being sadistically tortured, enduring a prolonged and violent death. His body was never found, and the exact details of his demise remain a mystery, adding a dark chapter to the violent saga of Manchester's criminal underworld. Paul Doyle always said he was born to be a criminal, and long ago accepted that his fate would either be death or a life sentence. In 2015, that premonition was close enough when he was sentenced to 16 years in prison for his involvement in a plot to import massive quantities of Class A drugs worth £300 million into the northwest of England. During the trial, his lawyer described Doyle's downfall as the decline and fall of a drug dealer. He said, "The defendant has nothing left apart from his family. The house has gone. His ruin is complete, and he must accept the whole responsibility for it." As for Paul Massey, he was murdered on July 26, 2015, in a brutal attack outside his home in Salford. Massey was shot multiple times with an automatic weapon by a masked gunman who ambushed him as he exited his car. The killing was a well-planned assassination, reflecting the violent world of organized crime in which Massey was deeply entrenched. Despite attempts to reform in his later years, the reputation Massey had built over decades in the criminal underworld ultimately led to his untimely and violent death. While serving time at Thorncross Open Prison in Warrington, Paul Doyle finalized his book, Surviving the Madness. The memoir reflects on his life of crime and violence, urging others to avoid his mistakes. Doyle advised would-be criminals to channel their energy into legitimate ventures, like starting a business, instead of pursuing crime. As he neared an early release, Doyle was unexpectedly transferred to a more secure Category C prison, HMP Hindley, and placed in segregation. His publishers claimed this was punishment for his book, but prison officials cited breaches of license conditions. After his release in 2022, Paul told the MEN, "Being out is going to get a bit of getting used to. At every traffic lights these days, it looks like match day. People think you can just go back to normal, but it's not like that when you've just walked out of the doors of a prison. It's going to take maybe 18 months. Over the years, with experience, I've come to realize there are different ways of doing things than just going back and forth from prison. There was no sense of hope in that life. When I saw young lads in prison, they are like zombies. The person I was then isn't the person I am now. I can't go back to that life. If I breach my license, I'll be going away for a very long time." Thanks for watching. If you found this video on the life and crimes of Paul One Punch Doyle insightful, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to Dark Sleuth Secrets, and hit the notification bell for more true crime stories. And comment below your thoughts on this gritty period in Manchester's criminal underworld. And until our next video, stay curious and keep sleuthing.